everyone, and welcome back to Don't Open That Door. It's Dan, Nico, and Just once again, and we're here with a very special guest. We've got director Bruce Wemple. Fans of the podcast will know him from Monstrous, but we're here today to talk about his latest release, Dawn of the Beast. So first, Bruce, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me on. It's going to be fun.
Very true. So to lead off with, we can see from the trailer, this movie stars two very famous cryptids. We've got Bigfoot and the Wendigo. So how did you kind of become interested in, these two creatures, and what made you want to bring these creatures to the big screen?
Well, it definitely started at Bigfoot, well before Wendigo. This goes back to when I was a kid. I grew up around the Adirondacks and really into hiking, really in, a lot of camping, that kind of stuff. And we always would talk about Bigfoot with like me and my dad. And I didn't actually realize until later about how big into Bigfoot he was as a child when my grandmother had said, oh, this is like your dad's old childhood thing. And it was a giant folder of Bigfoot newspaper clippings from every sighting that had happened locally and around. And there's a town called Whitehall that's not too far that is one of the Bigfoot capitals of the world. They have all these sightings. They have a Bigfoot festival every year. There's the giant Bigfoot statue that's actually in Monstrous. And I definitely got pretty fascinated with Bigfoot. And that kind of led me to wondering, what other kind of, especially local legends were around there. And that's where I got kind of interested in the Wendigo. And the Wendigo, just, I don't know, it was that was Bigfoot was something fun. And I always, when I knew so much about it, I really wanted to get into it. And the Wendigo was more really creeped the crap out of me. And then and that was something I was like, all right, that's a scary movie right there. And because Bigfoot can go a lot of different directions.
Okay. Now, I guess one other question too. So we've seen kind of, you had, a movie with Monstrous where it was just Bigfoot. Did you always have in mind that you were going to have these two meet and potentially fight, or was this an idea that developed over time?
No, it was never. I can't say never. It was discussed, but I would say less discussed, more joked about. As we were it wasn't something that we really took seriously because Monstrous and The Retreat are they're very different. They're similar to each other, I would say, a little bit in terms of tone, but they're very different than Dawn of the Beast. Dawn of the Beast is a very different tone, very different movie, and that we definitely used Monstrous and The Retreat as ways for the characters to examine themselves and to really make it about the characters. And it wasn't until we had finished those two where we just kind of wanted to, crack a beer, have a good time, and put the monsters on show and make them the star and really just make a popcorn drive-in 70s, 80s horror movie where, people just have a good time with it and don't have to, it doesn't take the same out of you as something like Monstrous or The Retreat.
Okay. So I know Dan has a couple questions about something similar to that. What's up, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, so as we've kind of talked about, you've got, The Retreat, Monstrous, and now Dawn of the Beast. You kind of have a little cinematic universe almost going on. But each of the movies isn't really related to each other necessarily, aside from, the creatures, of course. Was there a reason that you didn't really go full in and make them related, or was that kind of the plan from the start to do that?
No, it was Monstrous and The Retreat were supposed to be complete standalone movies. And they neither of which was necessarily designed to be an all-out creature feature, the way Dawn of the Beast is. They're character studies for the most part. Monstrous is definitely a romance thriller. And The Retreat is more of a psychological thriller. But knowing, these cryptids and knowing what's around these cryptids and what they can do was a really good way for us to, make these movies and tell these stories the way we wanted to tell them. And then, so those were completely on their own. If that was part of the plan, I think, maybe we would have decided, I think we maybe would treat it a little different if it was, but it absolutely, those movies are designed to take, I mean, there's nothing that says that they can't take place in the same universe. So I'll let everyone else decide whether they do or don't, because they're both in the Adirondacks. They both are based in real places in the Adirondacks, and everything about the locations and the mythology is all true for Monstrous and The Retreat. And then, it was Dawn of the Beast where we decided let's let's take just, the fun parts of both movies and put them into one.
Sure. Do you have any plans to do, I don't know if you can or want to talk about it, but add any other sort of monsters to the universe, so to speak?
It's a good question. We've been considering this our Adirondack Monster Trilogy.
Okay.
So right now we're considering it a trilogy. Whether we revisit it with adding more, put a Mothman or Jersey Devil or
Yes, I was
something in
hoping you'd
there.
say
Yeah.
that.
Who knows? We'll see. I mean, we gotta kind of. It was really rapid fire the way these movies they weren't supposed to come out as close to each other as they kind of end up kind of happening. So we still have to wait and see how the movies do and what where we're at after that. We have a lot of other projects going on too. But yeah, I mean, I love this stuff. I love creature features. I love exploring that mythology. I love the area. So if the chance came up to, build on that, what we already have, absolutely, totally would.
I think that would be kind of cool to kind of
Be rad as hell.
sneak in little other monsters here and there,
Create our own mini dark universe,
Right.
Adirondack dark universe.
Sure enough.
into it.
Sure enough.
So kind of like on the note of you were mentioning how you had the films are coming out in sort of like rapid succession. I know that Anna Shields does a lot of the writing work with this, and how involved you see yourself getting in that process, in particular with the sort of like back-to-back releases of this. It seems like you've been, pretty prolific during the pandemic, I would say.
It's interesting because Monstrous we actually shot in like late 2018, 2019.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, but that was something that we financed completely ourselves, was like, made with love, and just Anna had written this thriller script and I wanted to make this Bigfoot movie. And like, we were talking about how the movie, there was going to be a monster that kind of held them together. I'm like, let's just lean all the way into Bigfoot mythology and make Bigfoot the reason these two and Monstrous have to stay together. And then we can explore that story, and then, really just examining the nature of, evil and what is a monster through that. And I was just excited because I've also always wanted to make a Bigfoot costume, like do it right, not just like a Halloween Bigfoot costume. So I got to work on that, and I was in Brooklyn, and I was on my roof with like this giant fur suit and this muscle suit, like dyeing it the right color, matting it up, getting it was crazy. So we did that movie, and then it was kind of, we finished it after a few months, really, because it was, insanely, it was next to nothing what we were working with with that movie. And then we found Uncorked, who got the movie, and then they helped us out with putting together The Retreat, which the script was already written at that point for The Retreat. And that was much more, for me, a personal story. That was trying to, they're very similar in kind of the tone, but I really wanted to use the Wendigo to do a psychological thriller meets like a survival story. That kind of, alone in the mountains and fighting against not only the elements, but the literal monster. That was the idea going into it. But that was almost a year after Monstrous when we shot that. And that was very close back to back. Like Uncork picked up Monstrous and then helped us with The Retreat. And so at that point, those two were always going to come out back to back, just because that was the kind of the conversation.
The nature of the beast, almost.
Yeah. And it was never meant to be like that. So they I think they came out like 2 months between each other. So, which was cool. I was psyched because it was like, oh wow, we got like one movie and so, but definitely wasn't like part of some master plan or anything. We were just hoping we could get it released and, hopefully make another movie at a certain point. There was never a long-term plan. So, but after we did those two movies, Uncorked was pretty happy. And then that's when the conversation started, like, okay, what's next? And that was always lingering in our heads, like, okay, we just did these two very personal, dramatic atmosphere. All these kind of things that you associate with those two movies is very character-based. And we're like, it's summer. And that was during the pandemic. It's like summer, let's do a cabin in the woods, all out, monster mayhem. Let's put a little Evil Dead in there, and let's just lean all the way into the tropes and just make a movie that people just sit back and have fun with.
Okay, I do have to say this. So, for our listeners now, we're about to delve into a spoiler-filled section where we really dig into some of the guts of Dawn of the Beast. But before we do that, if you haven't seen the movie, you're definitely doing yourself a disservice if you haven't. So, Bruce, where can the people find your movie? Where can they check it out at?
Pretty much anywhere you can rent movies on demand. So that's your Amazons, Vudu, iTunes, all of those kind of VOD rental platforms.
Perfect, perfect. So definitely give yourselves a chance, check that movie out, and then check back right now because we're about to dive into the spoiler-filled section. So, Dan, I mean, you won. You won the toss-up. So, Dan, go ahead and ask because we all know what's coming up here. Go ahead, Dan.
So when we watched the trailer for this, we were like, okay, this looks intriguing. Yeah, this looks cool. This looks cool. And then we were like, wait, Bigfoot, Wendigo. And then we saw something that we were like, wait, is there a fight scene? Are they fighting? And then yeah, in the movie they definitely fight. And that was my favorite part of the movie. That was such an awesome fight scene. How did you kind of come up with that fight scene, or like did the whole film, like production wise or anything, build around that, or the writing kind of build around that? Or can you just talk to me about the fight scene? Because I loved that part.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what's funny is we kind of shot the movie in a kind of a weird way and because this is partially because of the pandemic, having to, be safe and everything. But we shot the cold open first, and this was like a few weeks before, and that was just like almost like a test run and just like kind of getting in the groove and making sure, we can do everything safely. This is going to work and everything. So we did the cold open, and then that was at that point where we had developed the movie far enough and the script and everything, and like, okay, we're going to do this movie. And I went with the crew to the location first, and we were shooting in this place in Western New York that was like on 200 acres. And so we had all the forests we could work with. And we started with the fight scene.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So what was super fun about that was it was the hardest scene in the movie, obviously. That's not a surprise. Sure. It's the most difficult scene in the movie to shoot. There's just a lot of moving pieces in that scene. But what I thought worked really well was so we shot that scene, and then we had a few days off before the rest of the cast came in, and we started shooting the other pieces. And I was able to cut the fight scene, not like the final version of the fight scene, but at least like put the music and kind of get that going. And then I was able to show the cast when they got there that fight scene and tell them, this is what the movie is building to. This is, we're building a movie around this. This is the centerpiece. Just so, and I always believe, like, for a director, regardless of technical know-how or anything like that, the best thing they can do is make sure everyone's making the same movie. And that fight scene really just put everyone on the same page, got everyone not only excited, but tonally at that point was like, okay, this isn't Monstrous, this isn't The Retreat, this is a completely new, bigger, crazier thing.
Yeah. And I watched, I saw your special effects person, Jared, right?
Yep. Jared Ballig.
Yeah, I saw on his Instagram scene, he posted like a little behind the scenes of Anna, I think, getting her arm ripped off. It was always cool to me to see sort of behind the scenes. But how was the kind of effects done in I mean, comparing it to Monstrous, there's more fight scene and more gore and stuff in this movie than Monstrous was, if I remember.
Yeah, like 100 times more. But yeah.
Yeah. So what was kind of the process for that, and how did you go about doing that aspect of it, I guess?
Yeah, Jared had his work cut out for him with this movie. Like, there's a lot going on. You have the Wendigo demons, the actual possessed demon, which had like 3 stages into it. There was like the stage 1 where she's a little messed up, and then 2, 3, and then the final version, and then Bigfoot. And so he got to work like as soon as we kind of got the green light. We got the green light based on like I'd written a story that how this movie was kind of going to play out. Then the script got to work, but while Anna was actually writing the script, we were already in pre-production putting stuff together. Like it was happening very quickly. The only question was exactly when we were going to shoot it because, pandemic reasons.
Sure. So
Jared was already sending me molds as the script was being written and of the different creatures, as well as we were making a list of gore gags, whether, the arm getting pulled off or the stick through the back of the head and the mouth as, the no arms and kind of stuff. And he gets so psyched about it. So it's not like a hard thing to motivate him or explain to him. I was kind of explaining, I'd make him reference to some movie and he'd be like, I know exactly what you're talking about. He's like, Cannibal Holocaust. I get it. And then, so, and it would be so, and then, so he would get to work in his little lab he's got. And then I'd go and visit him and and then we kind of tried to isolate those gags back to back to back. So those deaths and everything. Because when you're on set, it's weird when you're doing a movie like this. It's like all of a sudden 2 people in a room talking or 3 people in a room talking with no monsters or no gore or anything. All of a sudden it's like, oh my God, this is so easy. Why doesn't someone do a whole movie like this? So you try to get a lot of that done on its own and then save days just to be doing those effects shots because they take so much time. So that's kind of the mentality. It was like whenever there was a monster or a couple monsters or those, the bloody gore and everything like that, we kind of reserved just days to do that where we didn't have to worry about, getting a full, dialogue scene in along with it. We were just able to, buckle down and focus on that stuff.
That's a good idea. Yeah, for sure.
That it makes sense, and I'm glad to hear that was like the center focus. That just makes my horror heart swell. So, taking it back to the Wendigo for a second, out of curiosity, what do you and everyone on the set call the Wendigo spawns? We've been calling them like Wendigools or like Wendigoons on the pod. What's your take on it?
Wendigools. I think like Wendidemons at one point was like the. But yeah, I love Wendigools. That's really cool. Yeah, that's I'm gonna stick with that.
Well, yeah, thank you. Got the DOtD stamp of approval there. But so where was the inspiration for those Wendigoons, Wendigools, whatever you want to call them? They were terrifying, and they were a huge part of why that fight scene was so well done. It just felt overwhelmingly menacing with all those things there.
Yeah, I mean, I think going into it, we already knew kind of who was going to play the hero role, who was going to play the villain role in a Bigfoot and Wendigo. I think it was pretty obvious. So that Wendigool, I'll jump on, that Wendigool is that's straight out of The Retreat. That's the same creature design and everything. And so that's where most of that effort was put in was that in the mythology about, you have this spirit with this like kind of Grim Reaper type presence and that's all part of the Algonquin legend of, it can possess your mind, it targets the selfish, and there's a lot of different versions of like the design and stuff, which was kind of more exciting because there's versions, it has the big deer face or the antler. It's kind of like, there are tons of different, but we went with the specific version of there's kind of a spirit, and that we always called the spirit.
Okay.
Yeah, that was always called the spirit. And that was, would be kind of floating. And that was the first symbol of that person's getting possessed. And then, once you see it and it gets you, then you get, and it's called actually, and we reference this in The Retreat, but Wendigo psychosis, which ended up being kind of a somewhat, and I don't know how real a medical term this is, but it has been used in like medical journals of like the people that think they have a craving for flesh. Yeah. It's something that can like get inside your head. And so they labeled it Wendigo psychosis. And so that's what we kind of decided we were going to go into, that like Wendigo psychosis eventually led you to slowly become one of those Wendigools. And that, so the character of Isabel in Dawn of the Beast was on her way to being that full bald, nasty looking thing. But yeah, we got her at probably a 7 out of 10 before she hit the rest.
Well, that's terrifying. Let's turn the tables here and take a look at Bigfoot or Sasquatch now. Did you always intend for him to be sort of like hero-esque, or does he kind of want people to just leave his forest?
Oh yeah, he wants people to leave, but I think there's 100% he was going to be the hero. Just like Monstrous, it was a very similar. He's the kind of the protector of the forest, and I really like this idea that there's, these other cryptids out there, and Bigfoot, while not necessarily the scariest or the all this other stuff, is always going to be this protector, just because and the idea that because we had talked about, like, why wasn't Bigfoot, couldn't Bigfoot turn into a Wendigo? Couldn't the Wendigo possess Bigfoot?
Oh shit!
And I think
that's the next movie, right?
Well, I don't think so, because I think Bigfoot's not corruptible like that. I think that's what we decided was you need that level of selfishness and nastiness to, succumb to the Wendigo and become that. And that's why when it came to Bigfoot versus Wendigo, the spirit was powerless, and all it could do is send its Wendigos and to get pounded by them. So that was never in question of like how we were going to approach this. Of like, we were going to make the Wendigo the villain of the story, the idea that all of these people were just going to be wiped out by the Wendigo. You're going to hate the Wendigo, and then to, really bring in Bigfoot to be for that hero moment.
Yeah, I definitely think that was really well done, especially at the start, because obviously, no spoilers. There's no way we could have known. So at the start, where he's kind of taking people and, he's just like, he could catch you when you're just taking a piss outside. He's not going to hurt you. And I was like, nah, he's definitely a good guy. He's definitely a good guy. And then it just got to that point. I was like, oh, snap. When the fight came through, I was definitely like maximum levels hyped.
Oh, yeah. No, I appreciate that. No, that was always the intent, was just to make sure that, again, the centerpiece of the movie was that fight. If that didn't work, we knew the rest of the movie kind of falls apart pretty quickly. Because that's what it's leading to the whole time. And that we really just had to make it that pretty much every character was taken out at that point. We could leave one left. And at that point, then boom, you're going to get hit with the Bigfoot.
Got you. So real quick, for those of us that have seen the previous two movies, are there any kind of maybe Easter eggs or callbacks to the previous two? I think and Dan and I went back and forth on this a little bit. The cabin in the movie, is that the same cabin from Monstrous, or is that a different cabin?
No, it's a different cabin. That's a different cabin.
Okay.
I thought it was.
I think it's probably similar. There's like an Adirondack architecture. So like there's a lot of like the Adirondack cabins, they have similar, these tall ceilings and that, the kind of the log cabin wood side and the decks and everything. So there's a lot of similarities, but no, it was a different cabin.
Okay. And, kind of before we let you go, we've got a recurring segment on the pod, kind of a what would you do type situation. So we've got two real quick ones for you here. So first off, we're going to put you in Chris's shoes during the big fight. So, you've got all these kind of Wendigos around you. Bigfoot shows up and he's starting to fight him. So you have two choices here. Do you run away, or would you actually try and fight them off? How brave are you, would you say?
Oh boy, no, I'm probably running away. Yeah.
Yeah, same.
I don't know though. It's tough when you've been running for that long and just been, seen everyone die. If you put me right there in his shoes right now, 100% I'm running. Hard to say if how long you can run for before you just got to turn around and try something new. But yeah, it's definitely I'm running away.
And first off, that was actually the most popular answer on the podcast. I think Nico and Dan are both cowards.
Yeah,
but
I'll take it. I'll live. I'm fine.
We live, Justin.
So there's that. But for the second piece, we're gonna stick you in Chris's role again. So first off, I just want to say real quick, the lore book where they actually see the drawings, that was really badass, by the way. That's a really cool concept. But let's say you see that. What's your first reaction? You see this, you're at the cabin for, a cryptozoology trip. You see this book. Are you like, oh, this is chill? Might have just seen a dead body, but this is also pretty chill.
It's a good question. Yeah, I think anytime you find a book in a cabin, you got to ask questions, especially something like that, especially something that homemade. And, if it's printed in there and you can tell it's been republished, but no, if someone's been writing a journal that's scary, that's never a good sign. I would definitely be out of there. I mean, there's a number of things that I think that those fatal decisions are awesome in any of those horror movies. The big one is, finding the dead body and deciding to keep walking and all that kind of stuff. It's, it's just leading into, what the mess ups that are going to get you killed in a horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
No, definitely very true. Very true. So we'd like to thank you so much for coming on today. Now, real quick, is there any kind of last words you'd like to tell the audience about the movie, and where can the people find you on social media?
Yeah, I again, about the movie, I just hope that, everyone is able to sit back and just have a good time with it. I think especially there's an interesting thing I've been talking about with people, because, after Monstrous and The Retreat, there's a certain expectation of what this movie was going to be. And it's something different. And like, while we tried to lean into those classic horror tropes to an extent, we also tried to subvert them as much as possible. Like, we tried to make it hard to guess who's going to make it out. We didn't have that classic, final girl, tragic backstory, something horrible happened and now she's got to get over that, or something like that. We purposely avoided that just so we could make the monsters a star of the movie, and B, when you see Chris at that one point being like, I'm gonna go check out those birds, I'll meet you guys back later. It's like, okay, this guy's definitely dying first. Yeah, and so I hope people take it for what we want it to be, and that's just a sit back, laugh, cheer, get scared, jump a little bit. Yeah, that's exactly what we want people to do with this movie. So I hope they have as good of a time, checking it out as we had making it.
Awesome. And where can the people find you on social media?
My Instagram is Bruce Wemple. That's really about. I have a Twitter, but I'm not good at it. Don't do it much. So. It's a lot, but I think Instagram, is the spot.
All right, well, thank you very much, dear listeners. As always, you can find Dawn of the Beast on pretty much all on-demand platforms. Please check it out. That's been it from us here at Don't Open That Door. Take care of each other. If you get lost in the woods, try not to piss off a spirit. And as always, don't open that door. Bye.